We've actually been preparing for the cold weather events of this year for quite a while now, taking a lot of lessons that we learned from Winter Storm Uri. One of those areas that we've been improving on is with our community health paramedics and our collaborative care communication center. These paramedics are highly trained to offer alternative solutions where maybe an emergency room would not be the best option for them. They really have a lot of tools that they can use to resolve people's issues during the cold weather. Our industry has changed a lot. We get a lot of 911 calls that don't necessarily mean life or death. These patients we consider low acuity patients where they need a problem solved. Sometimes it's a medication that needs to be refilled. Sometimes it's inaccess to healthcare or no funding for healthcare. And in situations like the storm, maybe they just need shelter. These paramedics are specifically trained in social work, mental health. They carry the Rolodex for all the social services in town. And so they're able to respond to these 911 calls and really come up with inventive solutions to solve people's problems. They're all over the city. They can get people into warming centers, they can get people into cold weather shelters, they can work with neighbors and friends and family members and try to kind of coordinate all of those issues so that people aren't left vulnerable. So the need is great, especially with the unhoused. There is a collection point downtown at One Texas Center where there's an intake process into cold weather shelters that are spread throughout the city. That intake process goes from 6 to 8 today and will continue from 6 to 8 every day until this is resolved. That can get people who are unhoused or who need shelter into a cold weather shelter where they can stay warm, they can bring their pets, they can bring their families. They do provide food, and then they give them a safe place to stay. Well, obviously, especially with the wind chills being as low as they are right now, it's very hard on your body, especially if you're living, unsheltered. So frostbite is definitely a concern. Hypothermia is definitely a concern. And the storm front hit just several hours ago, and we've already ran several hypothermia calls for assistance. So the threat is real, and I would encourage anyone that needs shelter to try to make it down to the intake center at One Texas Center. So in our experience, it kind of comes in waves. When it starts to get cold like this, some people think that they can manage it, they can tough it out. What we find is that as the cold and the duration go on, it becomes unbearable. So we anticipate overnight to start getting a lot of calls for people saying, I need shelter, it's cold, please help me. And that's where these community health paramedics and the collaborative care communication center work together to try to solve problems for those people. There are shelters all over the city, and these community health paramedics will use city shelters, church shelters, whatever is available to them at that time. Extremely important. As you can imagine, when we get cold weather like this, our calls for service goes up. We get busier, people tend to need medical assistance at a higher volume when it gets cold. If these community health paramedics can take a little bit of that burden off of the transport ambulances, that makes a huge difference. People should call 911 anytime that they feel like they cannot manage the situation that they're in. If the cold becomes too unbearable, if they're unsheltered, if they're hungry, we will do everything that we can to provide a solution for those problems. If anyone is in need of shelter, I would encourage them to make their way by any means possible down to One Texas Center. We're having an intake process today from 6 to 8. We're also going to have an intake process from 6 to 8 on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday as well. There's a lot of options to get down there. If you do not have your own transportation, obviously you can use a rideshare program. Cap Metro is also giving no-cost transports down to the intake center. And if you have no other options, Austin EMS will do everything that we can to facilitate that problem.